Practice makes perfect by Nyan Sanketsu, Chapter 16. Just a little discord. I have to do this on my own. That's what I thought, that's what I thought too, at first. But you're not alone. We're friends, aren't we? Let me help. Just a little discord. Well. Was this what defeat felt like? It was a rather curious sensation, all things considered. Truth be told, Naruto had almost forgotten what it felt like anymore. It came as something of a surprise when he opened his eyes, only to realize he couldn't move properly under his own power. There was no panic on his part, just a faint sense of surprise, chagrin, followed by bemusement. The bed creaked beneath him when he tried to rise, and for a spasm stopped him in his tracks. Really, it was his own fault. He let his guard down at the last second, thinking Saffron would hold back. She hadn't. His dear daughter had blasted him full on. This was the result. He winced as his injuries protested anew. He was almost proud. Unfortunately, said pride was overshadowed by all this unyielding pain. Damn! He smacked his lips aloud, producing an audible pop. She really got me. That's what I get for underestimating her. He'd heal from this. He knew he would. It just might take a bit. One did not tank a Bijudama and walk away unscathed after all. He certainly hadn't. Mentally, he took stock of his injuries. 3 broken ribs, a punctured lung, a bruised heart, and fractured spine alongside a missing leg well below the kneecap, accompanied by some rather nasty burns and a black eye besides. He'd regenerate most by the end of the day. Granted, the leg might take an extra day or two, maybe a week to properly reconnect the chakra coils there, but then what? Kurama interjected with a vengeance before he could finish that thought. Hunt John down and drag him back by the ear. Naruto clicked his tongue and rolled his eyes with a mild sigh. Oh, now you show up. Don't give me that. I had to come back. How else would you heal? Silence stretched between the two of them. How's John? His voice echoed in the empty room, yet for all that, it did nothing to muffle his own anxiety. Well enough. No thanks to you. Penny finally found him. I take it that was your doing. His brow furrowed. I just want to make sure he's safe. Kurama huffed. He's quite fine where he is. I've been keeping an eye on him. It's not about me. He tried to rise, only to kiss as his injuries protested. Not anymore. If he had run away to live a normal life on a farm or something, I could have let that slide. Beacon's a different story. If he goes spilling shinobi secrets there, out into the world, you do realize he'll run the moment he sees you, if not fight outright. Good thing I don't plan on fighting. Saffron had given an idea, something to think on. He wasn't sure when or how it had come to him, only that it had. Maybe she'd knocked some sense to him, or maybe there had been a part of him that wanted her to win. He wasn't sure anymore. He'd gotten a glimpse in the mirror and he didn't like what he'd become. The door creaked open. Naruto lifted his head with a groan. He caught a familiar blonde braid in his peripherals and grimaced now as its owner shut the door behind her, locked it too. Juniper Arc didn't look happy. Kurama fled with a whimper. He'd find no help on that front. Hey, honey. He managed to smile as she stalked up to his bedside. I can explain. Her palm swung in a streak of gold on red. Fire flashed across his face, snapping his head to the side. All right. I deserve that, he grunted out. Probably a few more, if we're being honest. Juniper yanked on his ear, dragging his face back to hers. Ow! Naruto winced now, managing a fractious smile. Okay, maybe I got carried away. Did you now? His wife was always at her scariest when she smiled, and she did so now. Not only did you ruin our yard and scare the children, but Saffron's been holed up in her room for the last 2 days. She thought you were dead. A blink. Oh. Was I really out that? Juniper waved her fist before his face with intent. Finish that sentence, dear husband, and I won't be held responsible for what happens next. All right, he sighed. I'll apologize to her. I didn't mean for things to get out of hand. Her head butted against his. You certainly will. And as for John, Naruto said his jaw. I'm not giving up on our son. I'm well aware. Juniper pinched his cheek. I'm not telling you to, you silly man. We're going to Vale the moment you've recovered. I owe that boy a spanking for worrying me sick. He opened his mouth to protest, to say he could do it alone, only for her to pinch his lips shut. If it comes a test, I'll be the one administering it, not you. Naruto couldn't help but wince at that. He'd intended to drag John back, but if his mother wanted to assist his skills... Oh dear, sweetie, you'll be easy on him, right? And Juniper's smile was all teeth. We can't leave the children by themselves. He tried to protest in vain. Who knows what they'll go get up to without supervision? Her smile said as she'd sussed him out. I'm sure they'll love the Vital Festival, won't you girls? A ragged cheer went up behind the door. Cheeky buggers. Well, that would certainly work. Maybe. Hopefully. I knew there was a reason I married you. Still not sweet-talking your way out of this, dear. He offered her a weak smile. Can't blame a guy for trying. She kissed him, bit him biting hard. You're sleeping on the couch tonight, mister. That was coming. John could feel his heart pounding in his chest, a steady thump, thump, thump that echoed his own thoughts with every step through the streets of Bell. In summary, shit. And dark clouds loomed overhead, threatening rain. He almost wished they'd get on with it already. At least then he'd have an excuse to hide. No, he knew better. There would be no hiding from this. He was spoiled, fried, finished, filled, fucked, and many other words that started with the letter F. Really, it was all he could do to keep walking, to absolutely search for Blake with one eye while the other kept watching his back. That would come for him, no doubt about it. A child wouldn't fight him. Hell, she might even help. Was he strong enough to face him alone? He knew the answer. No, he gotten stronger, learned new tactics, teamwork, but it wasn't enough. In a fair fight, he would lose. But do I have to fight fair? I'm a shinobi that always said to look underneath. He couldn't drag his friends into this, much less his team. There would be questions, inquiries that he wasn't ready to answer. This was his battle to fight, his life to live. Maybe if he had his semblance, assuming it was anything useful, and again, gimmicks wouldn't save him here, even if his was something absolutely powerful. My fight with your head, not your fist. That always said. Your mind is your best asset. He'd like to believe that, and maybe he might have if his own wasn't a frazzled mess. Don't suppose you have any ideas, Kurama? Naruto's never been one for grand tactics. If you catch him off guard, fat chance of that. You might have a bit more time than you think. He and Saffron got into a tussle recently. John nearly misstepped over me. You were a part of it, yes. Guilt crashed down on him. With an effort, he choked down his anxiety and tried to marshal his thoughts. It's fine. Everything is fine. Just calm down. He isn't here yet. You still have time. Focus. Think. Remember. You remember your training. His mind bleeded otherwise. His first rules of dad's training: do not talk about dad's training. Not helping. Really, it wasn't fair. He'd been so careful too, trying to hold himself back, keeping his powers in check, not giving anyone chakra, trying to fit in. He liked to believe he had for the most part. Everyone thought he was just a strong huntsman candidate, a warrior in training. He'd been able to coast by on that excuse for a while, and then she'd come around. Why are you here again, Penny? Why wouldn't I be, cousin? His so-called cousin granted him a guiltless smile as she walked beside him. If you are searching for your friend, then I will help. That's what family does. And this girl was part of his family. How? He'd never met her before. Did she have something to do with Uncle Pietro? He didn't think the old geezer had a kid. We've stopped. A pair of hands tugged at his sleeves. Are you all right, cousin? Damn it, Ruby. Why did you have to fall? Why did you have to fall her off on me? It's just, I'm not sure Blake counts as my friend. Oh, Penny's smile only grew. Then shall I take you back to grandfather? He is very anxious to see you. John gulped and felt his heart skip a beat. I'm sure he is. High above them, the sky rumbled with thunder. John! He couldn't see it now in his mind's eye. The old man looming over him, face carved from stone, cracking his knuckles. No escape, stall, delay, deny. Blake is my friend. He all but bleated the words. Definitely my friend. We're the very best of friends. Absolutely besties. Green eyes brightened. Sensational. I look forward to meeting her. Perhaps she can be my bestie as well. A lead weight settled into the pit of his stomach. There really was no getting away from her. That settled it. He had to find Blake first, before anyone else. Time to pull out all the stops. Kurama, it'll help. Really? A hearty sigh filled his mind. You do realize this is cheating? I'll do whatever you want. Is that so? I'll hold you to those words. An awful pause swelled between them. John counted to 3, and then 6 blocks down, hang a right, take the third alley you pass near the docks. Might be able to outrun your cousin if you move fast. Fast? He could do that, but first, sorry, Penny, it's nothing personal. And John stabbed a finger to the sky. Look, and nevermore! Penny's head whipped to the right. Where? He absolutely blurred. It wasn't fair. Blake took herself down against the dumpster, knees into her chest. Her eyes stung. She tried to tell herself it wasn't from the tears, that she'd been up all night. That was surely why. She didn't cry. She refused to cry. She absolutely did not cry. Anyone who said otherwise was a filthy liar. Her hands tightened atop her knees. Damn it. High above, she heard the distant rumbling of thunder. With it came the rain, softly at first, then falling harder now, spattering against her head and shoulders. She drew herself back further into the alcove, seeking shelter from the storm. It wasn't comfortable, but at least it was dry, relatively speaking. She'd rest here for the night and chase her later tomorrow, at least tomorrow, she was close to the breakthrough. She knew it. She just knew it. She had to be. If she could just prove the White Fang's innocence, that all of these robberies were Toshwick's doing, then she could rest easy. Even even if it meant she'd never go back to Beacon or Ruby, or a shadow fell over her. So this is where you were. Blake heard them before she saw them, lightning crackling and lighting up the alley. She jolted and took him in at a glance now, soaked from head to toe, blonde hair outlined over his eyes, clad in a familiar armor, sword in his side. And John? Hiya, Blake. He managed an awkward wave, every bit as harmless as a wet puppy. You look like you're having a bad day. She nearly scoffed. Understatement of the century, that. Got room for one more? She shrugged one shoulder half-heartedly. He squirmed in after her. You know why I'm here, don't you? I do. Blake glared golden daggers at him. Don't trust, mustn't trust. He had secrets too. I'm not going back. John didn't say anything, didn't speak, didn't judge her. Somehow, that was so much worse than anything she'd expected. It forced her to speak. You don't understand. I didn't just hurt them. I betrayed them. I ran away. John literally said, yeah, I pretty much did the same. Wasn't a terrorist, though. You've got me beat there. So, about this crusade of yours. No, her very soul tensed. He'd tell Ruby where she was, or barring that, drag her back. She'd have to fight him. Could she win? Her eyes flitted to his weapon. She'd seen the saber of light it could become, just as she'd seen him fight. Even unarmed, he was a formidable opponent. He wouldn't go quietly. She didn't want to kill him either, which meant she'd have to knock him out. Not an impossibility, but she'd have to get the drop on him. Her shoulders tensed. A hand twitched towards Campbell's shout. You want some help? Blake blinked. Help. John offered her his hand, almost pleadingly. Do you want it? Her mind whirled. Didn't Ruby tell you? You know what I am? What I've done? Nah, it's fine. Blake's jaw clicked open, ears twitching atop her head. Excuse me? He'd ferret out her secret, and that was all he had to say. It was almost laughable. I mean, I ran away from my family too. John shrugged. We can be runaways together. Let me help you. Did she dare just... No, she clenched her teeth. I can do this by myself. You really can't. Even I can see that. Her lower lip trembled. Blake, you alright? No, she warbled. I'm not. He hugged her. It was such a sudden thing that she didn't even think to prepare herself for it. By the time she did, he was upon her, gently drawing her head into his chest. The faint scent of leather and sunlight filled her nose, alongside another, the softer smell she didn't recognize. A hand massaged the small of her back, as that once had when she was very small, and she found herself hiccuping despite herself. Let me go, blast you! She thumped his chest to no avail. I want to be alone! John didn't. Damn him. No, I don't think you do. Strong arms wrapped around her. People really should talk to other people every day. John held her close despite her struggles, even if it's just small talk. Otherwise, their hearts grow dark and sullen. His arms tightened around her, not harmful, not firm, but gentle all the same. Talking to others builds bonds of friendship and relationships. It broadens the mind, and it makes you feel grateful to be alive. That's the kind of creature we humans are. So, he swallowed a little. Talk to me. I know we don't know each other very well, but I want to help. She sniffled into his shoulder. You're just full of wisdom, aren't you? Nah, my dad told me those words. He beamed. They fit, right? Tears burned her eyes, crackling her resolve. Maybe a little. You can cry if you want. I won't tell anyone. She warbled, and the floodgates opened. It's just not fair. Previews. Cinder, what should we do? Nothing. He'd kill you if it came to a fight. That kid, he's an idiot. No way would he stand a chance. Her eyes flashed. Yes, ma'am. Sorry, ma'am. The Fall Maiden was here. She had to be. The power would be hers. Penny. Do not worry, cousin. She bounded backwards on her heels, ducked under a blade, then kicked his owners away. I am combat ready. Twisting and spinning, she moved amongst them, more a dance than a real fight. It was like watching Pyrrha. No, not quite Pyrrha, but different. All flowing grace and right in your face. The White Fang didn't stand a chance. I'm gonna let her hog all the glory. Nah. He raised Crother Morse, still in sword form, and banged the blade against his shield. Hey, over here! You hero types, always so noble. Torchwick had the good grace to grin. Unfortunately for you, I'm not alone. He slammed the two fingers into his mouth and whistled. Neo! John heard the sound of shattering glass behind him and whirled. A pair of mismatched eyes filled his vision. Then she was on him. Neil was good, very good. In terms of sheer agility, she'd give his younger sister trouble. However, he caught her by the wrist, and she folded it around gracefully, twisted her body in a manner that just shouldn't be possible to kick him in the face. He took the blow on his chin and slammed a knee into her solar plexus, sending her hurtling away. You're pretty good. She landed on and sketched a bow. He didn't have time for this. Do we have to fight? She touched the fidget to her chin, considering. She sighed. What do I have to do to make it go away? Her eyes lit up. Her fingers swept up to her cheek. Torchwick tugged his hat down. These kids just keep getting weirder. John, what did she mean by take you back? Ugh, leave it to Ruby to notice. Nor made a noise reminiscent of wedding bells. John felt his face flash with fire. Even he wasn't that dense. End of chapter 16. Practice makes perfect by Neon Sanketsu, chapter 17. Just a little payback. Wake not the sleeping dragon. Stir not the storm. Anger not the man who turns the other cheek, lest you be utterly destroyed. A proverb. Just a little payback. It wasn't hard to find the lead on the White Fang. John almost wished it wasn't, if only because it might give Blake a chance to return and reconcile with her team. But no, she remained doggedly determined. Oh, the irony! To seek them out wherever they were. And while he sensed a story there, he knew better than to pry. In hindsight, he really should have. It might have saved him a great deal of trouble down the road. Again, finding them proved easy, almost ludicrously so. Just a matter of putting one's ears to the ground. Were they even trying to hide? Didn't feel like it. One lead led to another soon enough, and they found themselves in a stakeout at the docks, waiting, and waiting some more now. Once again, he prayed the quarry wouldn't show. It would be so much easier if it was someone else, and some other valiant gang at work here. Blake wasn't about to leave without proof, of course, so he settled in to wait with her, despite Kurama's vocal protest. One of them would watch the dogs every 2 hours, give the other a chance to rest before rotating in again. That had been 2 hours ago. It was growing darker, and still no sign of any ne'er-do-wells. Really, you're too soft for your own good. She doesn't need your help. A child and his sisters would have said the same. John disregarded categorically, as she really does. If we leave her alone, she's going to do something stupid. You can't save everyone from themselves. Not even your father could. He lifted his chin. Then I'll just have to try harder than him, wouldn't I? There's the Uzumaki confidence again. A pale hand jostled his shoulder. John, are you awake? Oops, better open his eyes now before Blake thought he'd nodded off. He did so quickly, opened them with a sigh. Anything? No. Blake didn't look away from the shipping containers. The workers have offloaded all the crates from the boat and left half an hour ago. Now they're just sitting there. As were they, waiting. What are you doing? And curiosity killed the cat. Blake, almost always with questions. Meditating. Not a lie, technically. Helps focus my mind. I'm surprised. Her ears twitched atop her head, conveying her confusion. She really did look better without the bow. I didn't think you were the type. Oh, maybe he embraced the banter all too eagerly, but he was desperate. Anything to distract him from staring at boxes all night long. What type did you think I was? The type to rush in without a second thought. Her reply was candid as ever. You showed as much during your spars with Weiss and Yang. Her brow twitched again. You don't hold back in anything you do. Right. Heat sprayed through his face. Oh, Blake, if only she knew just how much he was restraining himself. At least, that's what I thought. Blake glanced back at the docks quickly, and finding them silent still, looked his way once more. You're surprisingly thoughtful. It was a struggle to keep his eyes on hers, and not her still twitching ears. He really wanted to touch them. But she was still speaking, and he must attend. Most of our kind wouldn't stop to help stranger, but you did. You helped me without a second thought. Did she still think he was honest? Damn Dad's whiskered cheeks inherited them, causing him all sorts of trouble. Maybe he should tell her. No, that would cause too many problems right now. Maybe later. Do you always do that? She asked, drawing him forth from his reverie, rushing without a second thought. He grinned despite himself. Not always. Sometimes I like to make friends. Is that what we are now? She scoffed, looked away from him again, missed his wince. Had he made a mistake? He was just trying to be friendly. John? He looked back. Golden eyes met his, half-lidded in intent. I appreciate this. She spoke softly, measuring the words with great care. Really, I owe you one. I do. The heat in her voice told him all he needed to know. She wouldn't take no for an answer. I'll find a way to make this up to you, somehow. Hey, what are friends for? The ghost of a smile touched her pale face. His heart skipped a beat. She chewed on her words for a moment before speaking. Say, I usually don't do this sort of thing, but there's a school dance coming up. A sudden gust of hot air shattered the moment and swallowed her words. The gale would have blown them down if they weren't already laying prone. With it came the telltale rush of a bulkhead, then another, followed by a third. A trio of them swept in, certain searchlights roaming in the gloom. One dove low to reconnoiter, and then landed and disregarded the landing ramp. A number of masked men and women disembark, weapons in hand. Even from here, he could see the bloody red logo etched in the back of their uniforms. Blake must have as well. Oh no, John almost didn't want to ask. Is that them? Yes, it's them. He heard Blake swallow beside him. I think deep down I knew. I just didn't want to be right. Hey, a new and strangely familiar voice hollowed from below. Torchwick, why was he here? What's the holdup? We're not exactly the most inconspicuous bunch of thieves at the moment, so why don't you animals try to pick up the pace? Trust me when I say you don't want me to motivate you. Blake scooted closer, saw him, and hissed. This isn't right. The White Fang would never work with a human, especially not one like that. John knew what she was going to do before she even climbed to her feet. He grabbed her wrist before she could fling herself off the edge. Blake, no. Blake, yes. She ran on him, eyes wild, unable to tear free from his iron grip. I trusted you before. Now it's your turn to trust me. I have to talk to them, which means I need you to stay up here and keep an eye on things. Here she offered her scroll to him. If anything happens, call Ruby and tell her I'm sorry. And that's beyond reckless. You're going to get yourself killed. Her voice rose in anguish. I have to do something. For the love of... Kurma pushed a torrent of golden chakra into his right hand and forced his fingers open again, against his will. The very second he did, Blake dropped her scroll at his feet, gave him a grateful look, and bolted. In an instant, she slipped away, vaulted off the shipping container, and vanished in the maze of cargo containers. John recoiled, clutching at his wrist, feeling betrayed. What was that for? To teach you a lesson. Kurma snapped, stonewalling him. Sometimes you have to let someone make mistakes. It's the only way to learn. Swearing softly to himself, he crouched down, snatched up and unlocked her scroll, and punched in a number. It connected almost immediately. Blake, where are you? She's at the docks. Get over here. Now. John, how did you? He hung up just as quickly. It didn't take Blake long to get the drop on Torchwick. His back was to her, and he was too busy berating the grunt to notice her. He did, however, notice Gumbo shroud biting under his neck. Aura cackled angrily, and the smooth criminal stiffened, all but jerking his chin upward to avoid what might have otherwise been a messy decapitation. Nobody moves. Oh, 4. Easy there, little lady. Let's not do anything we'll regret. Brothers of the White Fang. She glared at each of the grunts in turn. Why are you aiding this scum? Torchwick tittered. Didn't you get the memo, kitty cat? The White Fang and I are going in on joint business ventures together. Tell me, what is it before I take off your head and put an end to your little operation? John's sixth sense brindled a moment before it happened. 3 more bulkheads swept in from the clouds, and engines roaring. Roman laughed over the noise. Wouldn't exactly call it a little operation there, Puss in Heels. He angled his cane down and fired, blasting Blake clean off her feet. All hell broke loose as the rest opened fire. And that's my cue. Technically speaking, he'd done as she asked. He'd called someone from Beacon. It counted. Better safe than sorry. John leaped down after her. Besides, it was just a few untrained grunts. Bad guys, no real skill. What could possibly go wrong? Yep, you guessed it. John jinxed it hard. Ruby heard the explosion, saw the rising smoke in the distance. Well, 3 guesses as to where Blake and John were. First 2 didn't count. Crap baskets. On your left. The warning came a second too late as Roman unleashed a dust round on John's position, forcing him to duck somewhere between shield bashing one White Fang grunt and slamming Crusader Morris down on another. The last was still falling as he pivoted, desperately trying to bring his shield around to tank it with his aura, only for the shot to curve wide, missing him by a wide margin. Not so Blake. She vaulted away with the first shot, backflipped from another, used her siblings to skirt a third, and took off running. Roman stalked after her with a scowl, shooting as he went. Here, kitty, kitty, kitty. Blake! John spared her a quick glance, only to burst as the blade bounced off his armored back. No pain, but his aura had taken an unnecessary hit just now. She's fine. Focus up. Crusader Morris sang as it struck with the flat edge, both cracking the man's mask and sending him crashing down to join his fellows. Two more rushed him, and he backhanded them away with his shield. He heard bones crack as they tumbled to the floor. Ignore it. Harden your heart to it. These people knew what they were getting into. He waded into another group, sword swinging with restraint. Even then, his opponents cried out and broke like so much glass. Close your heart to it. It would have been simple to use his makeshift conjure the light blade within and cut them apart. Dead men tell no tales and all that. Almost tempting, really, but he wouldn't. He become many things since running away from home. A murderer wasn't one of them, so he restrained himself, limited himself, trusting in Blake to apprehend Torchwick while he dealt with the shaft. But there was just so many. And he was losing his patience. The next one to rush him found themselves swept clean off their feet. Enough. His temper sparked, slammed his shield down, created a shockwave from there, pushed Chakra through it, and forced it to bend with his will. Rounded earthen pillars sprouted from the floor, swatting the last of them aside like so many straw dolls. No one got up after that, just as well too. He didn't want to bust out anything more destructive than what he just used. Someone crashed into his back and bounced off. It staggered him. He pivoted again, expecting an attack from one of the grunts he must have missed. Instead, he found a very familiar fawn and slumped to his feet with a groan. She was clutching her side, buried an ugly burn against her hip. His eyes bulged. Blake, I'm sorry about your friend, came a familiar crooning voice. Guess that's what you get for letting the cat out of the bag. Up close, Roman Torchwick lived up to his reputation, if said reputation was a smug, arrogant arse. Care to try your luck, kid? He looked at the bulkhead still circling above. Or can we call this a night? Come quietly, and you won't be harmed. Blake tried to rise and failed. No, you can't. Of course, she wouldn't give up. Then again, neither could he. Crusader Morris unfurled once more as he took up his stance. We'll have to refuse. You're not the brightest bulb in the bunch, are you? And kid, wait a minute. His visible eye narrowed on them for reasons he couldn't understand. A sword and shield, huh? So you're the one she told me about. A wry grin touched his lips. I thought you'd be bigger. Your mama not give you enough milk or something? Did you hear what he just said? Get him. Instinct seized the will, and he seated reason happily, stepping in with an overhead sweep, forcing Roman to parry with his cane, and brought his shield around. Bastard tried to catch it with an open hand and grabbed it and grappled it away, only for him to collapse it back into a sheath and deck him in the schnoz. Blood burst, cartilage crackled, and down he went. Counteroffer. John planted a boot on his throat. Surrender, and you'll be treated with dignity. You hero types, always so noble. Torchwick had the good grace to grin despite his bloody nose. Unfortunate for you, I'm not alone. He slammed two fingers into his mouth and whistled. Kneel! John heard the sound of shattering glass behind him and whirled. A pair of mismatched eyes filled his vision. Then she was on him. He had to step off Roman just to defend himself. With what in places was she? A fighter that small shouldn't be this strong. Size matters not. Clearly so, because this girl was a human blender, chipping down his aura bit by brutal bit, an acrobatic monster that knew neither mercy nor quarter. She actually got a few good hits in. Usually he favored the brute force approach by practice to conceal his skill as much and style, but against someone like Neil, he may as well have been swinging a stick around. He wasn't fighting to kill. She was, and therein lied the rub. It was a rare day indeed when he actually had to try, but to use everything here would surely reveal him as more than a mere huntsman in training. Neil was good, very good. In terms of sheer agility, she'd give his younger sisters trouble. However, he caught her by the wrist, and she folded it around gracefully, twisting her body in a manner that should just be possible to kick him in the face. He took the blow on his chin, and slammed a knee into her solar plexus, trying to launch her back, only for her to open her parasol and float to the ground. What was she, Mary Poppins or something? You're pretty good. She landed and sketched a bow. He didn't have time for this. Do we have to fight? Roman's counterpart touched the finger to her chin, considering. John knew that look all too well. He had too many sisters not to. What do I have to do to make you go away? Her eyes lit up. Her fingers swiped up to her cheek. His own darkened realization. Now wait just a second. Hey, why was everyone interrupting him tonight? All eyes turned towards a nearby dust container. A familiar figure stood perched upon it, scythe in hand. Ruby? and no one else. Where in blazes was everyone? She swept crescent rows down with intent and glared silver daggers at Roman. Oh, hello, Red, the object of her ire catcalled up to her. Isn't it past your bedtime? And Penny poked her head around her shoulder, concerning him further. Ruby, are these your friends? They seem rather rude. She glanced her way. Penny, get back. Roman's cane flew up, an awful crack filled the air. Ruby went back, crashing into Penny, crying out in pain. Torchwick laughed. Nothing personal, kiddo. John didn't see what happened next, didn't hear a word. He didn't have to, didn't need to. All the colors of the world fell away. There was only him, the little hellion before him, and the laughing lunatic who had just shot his friend. A red haze fell over his vision. He heard something hammer in his ears, a steady pounding noise that he didn't recognize, not at first, one that grew louder with each passing moment. Oh, he knew now. It was his own heartbeat. Break, kill them, pulverize their corpses. He started forward. Neil got in his way again. Crusader Moore slammed down, forcing her to dodge or be split in half. Rather than face him head on, she twisted under him and disarmed him with a flick of her wrist. Crusader Moore's and his shield slipped out of his grasp and skidded across the docks. He paid little attention to them. If she thought losing his weapons would stop him, she had another thing coming. He didn't need his sword to wring her neck. Oi! And Kurma's voice sounded so faint now, distant, spoke from far away. John, focus! Don't lose control! It was no use. A switch flipped in the back of his head. Focus. Cast aside all unnecessary thoughts. Don't think about failure. Fear is a nuisance. Discard it. He gathered his chakra and aura into himself, into his body. Kneaded into his very muscles. They bunched and tensed, bristling beneath his armor. He stood a little taller as his wounds closed. Chakra cracked over his body, creating a haze of blue sparks as the wind began to pick up. Oh, come on! What the hell is this? Roman yanked his hat down to keep it from being blown away. These kids just keep getting weirder. Weird. The hoarseness of John's own voice surprised him. Had he always sounded like this? Is that all this is to you? A game? No. Torchwick turned at him. This is a heist. You meddling kids got in the way. It's your own damn fault. The last tenuous thread of John's self-control snapped with an audible twang. Blue eyes shimmered into a twisted shade of slitted scarlet. I won't let you get away with this. Roman rolled his eyes. Shaking in my boots, kid. Neil, finish him off. John took a long breath through his nose, inhaled deeply, filled his lungs with power. Neil hesitated before him, perhaps sensing the sudden upswing in strength. Rookie mistake. He recalled a distant lesson Dad had taught him when you saw someone about to pull out their ace, power up, or use some dangerous technique. You didn't stand there gawking like an idiot. You attacked. By that logic, the solution was simple. Just let it go. Attack. John threw his back and screamed. The world erupted into red light. Loud. Neil clamped both hands over her ears in a vain attempt to stifle the noise. No dice. It was everywhere, howling in her ears, rattling her teeth, searing her very soul. The cry shook the world around her, seared the waters of the docks like a great typhoon. It was the roar of a beast pretending to be a boy, a monster masquerading as a man. Now the facade fell away, and she found herself wishing her dear dum-dum hadn't been so dumb as to shoot that girl. She'd clearly meant something to him. Mercifully, the screaming ended as quickly as it began. The silence that followed was worse. Far worse. John Arc, or Blondie, as she'd taken to calling him, didn't look all that different now that he'd finished his little tantrum. Sure, his eyes had been blue a second ago. Now they were red, almost like that of a grim bud slit, and his hair had gone all glowing with that weird aura of his, like it was on fire or something, swaying in the breeze as the flame might. But beyond that, he looked entirely the same. She wouldn't be fooled. Changing the color of your eyes didn't do anything. She stepped in, tricked him into swiping at an illusion, then swept in on his flank to skewer him where he stood. Imagine her surprise then when her next thrust went wide. Blondie took a sharp step aside. His palm swept up. Neil's world went sideways, sending her sprawling to the docks. She scrambled upright, narrowly evading a punch that drilled the space where her head had been only a moment before. No way. There was just no way. You didn't get stronger by screaming. It just wasn't done. How did that make a lick of sense? How? An unseen blow found her gut, folded her in half, and sent her skipping across the dock like a flung stone. Momentum was not merciful. Something had changed. No, he had changed. Gone was the fumbling boy who'd been holding back. In his place. She didn't know what to call this. His moves, once sloppy and awkward, were suddenly smooth and crisp, hauntingly so. It was like he'd become a completely different person, and then he was before her. Oh gods, she hadn't even seen him move. You should be proud. His voice had dropped an octave, deepened into a low, bestial growl as he loomed over her, casting her in his shadow. Only my old man has ever made me this angry before. Neil stepped back, eyes flickering. A hand caught her wrist to wrench it upright painfully. It's over, Neil. You're done. What followed was not a fight. A fight was something she could understand, but this was not that. Clenched knuckles barreled into the side of her face, and even as she spun and she cracked into another, up became down, and suddenly down became the business end of a dust crate. He left her there, wedged her against the metal, and waited towards Roman. To his credit, her partner in crime knew when he was beat. He had the good sense to raise his hands and make peace, because he certainly didn't have her speed or grace to avoid a punch to the face. No, wait just a minute. I surrender. Let's be reasonable about them. A rousing roundhouse thundered into his jaw. He dropped like a sack of potatoes. Neil winced. He was still alive after that. Probably. Then she had other concerns, because Blondie turned, noticed she was still conscious, and walked her way. His face was blank. No, not quite. The fainted hint of a smile played at the corner of his mouth. What's wrong? He tilted his head, hair swaying in the eerie aura crackling around him. Is that all you've got? It made him look different, smug, sinister, savage. Exciting. Neil leaped at him again, grinning as he stood his ground. He parried her blade with a wrist, then his palm, now his elbow, batting her blade aside with almost callous ease, until finally he could take no more. Her sword struck his chest and shattered with a tortured wail of steel, leaving her clutching a ruined hilt. Okay, this was fine. She could still fight hand to hand, just needed to distract him, grab Roman, and it was like punching a brick wall. What was he made of? Pure metal. Clenched knuckles filled the entirety of Neil's vision. Her lips parted in a single soulless "Oh." Blondie beat her left, right, center, and sideways, dominated her, manhandled her, tossed her around like a rank amateur with callous ease. Wasted and gasping for air, she staggered to the right, then leaped back and up in a desperate bid to gain some distance. It was no use. Even as she dove towards Roman, Blondie stepped in and drove his knee up into her chin in a crackle of blue lightning. Her teeth clicked together painfully. Then she found herself airborne once more, tumbling end over end. He met her there in the air. Hands looked over his head and smashed her into the ground, a crater in the docks. Neil's aura fizzled out, unable to take any more. Exhausted, rushed in, and darkening her vision at the edges. She'd never lost this badly before, not even Cinder had beaten her and Roman like this. For him, it was duty. For her, it was love, terror, and awe at first sight. What was his name again? Remember, she had to remember. Ark. John Ark. She would remember that name. John Ark had no idea what he'd unleashed. Previews. She wasn't moving. Was that a good thing? John raised the boot over Neil's head, ready to bring it crashing down. This was what she deserved, what all of them deserved. Cousin? He blinked, snapped out of his rage. Penny, what are you doing here? It's dangerous. Do not worry, cousin. She bounced backwards out on her heels, ducked under a blade, then kicked it away. I am combat ready. I twisted and spinning. She moved away amongst them, more a dance than a real fight. It was like watching Pyrrha. No, not quite Pyrrha, but different. All flowing grace and right in your face. The White Fang didn't stand a chance. Gonna let her hog all the glory? Nah. He cracked his knuckles and wadded in. Neil was down. That just left Roman and the grunts. What a lovely day. They'd taken them captive, Roman and Neil both. How incredibly vexing. Ark had become an annoyance. Cinder, what should we do? Nothing. He'll kill you if it comes to a fight. That kid, he's an idiot. No way would he stand a chance. Her eyes flashed. Yes, ma'am. Sorry, ma'am. The Fall Maiden was here. She had to be. The power would be hers this time. But where the devil was she? I'd like to meet Amber. The girl glared at him from her bed. He looks weak. You're right, Garden. He growled, hoisting them upright. You're not a man. You're a pig. Now let me hear you squeal. John, what did she mean by take you away? Leave it to Ruby to notice. Nora made a noise reminiscent of wedding bells. John felt his face flash with fire. Even he wasn't that dense. And yet, the world went white. What's wrong, John? Dad? He looked like shit. Was it really him? A vision of him, the ideal he strove towards? He couldn't be sure. How you doing? This long-range communication jutsu burns through chakra like crazy, but it has its uses, provided you know where your target is. Now that I know you were at it's pretty simple. Listen to me, John. I know we've had our differences in the past. That's no fault of yours. I'm the one to blame for that. But you have incredible power. You just don't realize it. You've learned to use your aura and chakra together in ways your sisters can't even imagine. Because at the end of the day, you're more than just my son. You're me. When I was young, you see a problem, something that needs fixing, you run right at it and to hell with the consequences. You smash down any obstacle in your way. Dad, So why are you hesitating now? A finger poked his chest. Is it fear, doubt, regret? None of those things. I can't answer that for you, but I can tell you this: if you don't fight with everyone you have, sooner or later your friends are going to die. That Blake girl is going to die. Ruby is going to die. Pyrrha will die. Are you going to let that happen, or are you going to fail? No. That's right. A smug grin stretched across his face. You're better than that. You're better than me. You're better than them. You're better than me. Wait, is it really you? You're my son. That hasn't changed, even if I'm angry with you. Doesn't matter. Just do what you always do. Face your problem head on. Run towards it. Full speed ahead. Grit your teeth. Plant your feet. And eat that horse. Yes, sir. She closed the door behind her and locked it with her body. Locked it now, for good measures. Can we talk? Aren't we doing that right now? She squirmed a little in place. End of chapter 17.